Sarah Jenkins walked through the quiet hallways of Atlanta General Hospital during her regular night shift. The soft squeaking of her white nursing shoes against the polished floor was the only sound that broke the peaceful silence. At 32 years old, she had been working in the rehabilitation ward for the past 5 years, finding joy in helping patients recover and rebuild their lives. That peaceful April night in 2022 seemed like any other until the emergency department called about a new patient transfer. Sarah checked her watch, 11:45 p.m. Just as she was preparing the room, the doors opened, and the orderlies wheeled in Marcus Thompson, a 35-year-old software engineer who had been in a terrible car accident 3 weeks ago. Sarah noticed right away that Marcus was different from her other patients. Even though he was paralyzed from the waist down, his eyes held a spark of determination that she rarely saw in people who had just experienced such trauma. While most patients took time to adjust to their new reality, Marcus was already asking questions about his treatment plan and rehabilitation schedule. "Good evening, Mr. Thompson. I'm Sarah, and I'll be your night nurse," she said, checking his vital signs. "How are you feeling?" Marcus managed a small smile despite his obvious discomfort. "Please, call me Marcus. And honestly, I've had better days, but I'm alive, and that's what matters." His positive attitude surprised Sarah. Over the next few hours, as she helped him get settled and comfortable, they talked about small things. She learned that he worked for a big tech company, lived alone in a modern apartment downtown, and had a strange love for pineapple pizza, something that made her laugh and scrunch up her nose in playful disgust. The next few nights followed a similar pattern. Sarah would check on Marcus during her rounds, and they would talk for a few minutes each time. She discovered that before the accident, he had been developing software to help people with disabilities use computers more easily. Now, he said, he had a whole new perspective on why such technology was so important. One night, about a week after his arrival, Sarah found Marcus struggling to sleep. The pain in his back was particularly bad, and the medication wasn't helping much. Instead of just giving him another dose and leaving, she pulled up a chair and started telling him stories about her childhood in Memphis, about her grandmother's famous sweet potato pie, and about her dream of opening a small clinic someday. Marcus listened intently, and for the first time since his accident, he felt like someone was seeing him as a person, not just a patient. He shared his own stories too, about growing up as an only child, his love for coding that started when he was just 12, and his parents who had passed away a few years ago. Weeks turned into months, and Marcus made steady progress in his rehabilitation. Sarah watched proudly as he worked hard in physical therapy, never complaining even when things got tough. She found herself looking forward to their nightly conversations, which had become longer and more personal. Other nurses noticed how Sarah's face lit up whenever she talked about Marcus's progress, but she insisted it was just professional pride in seeing a patient do well. Deep down, though, she knew something was different about him. It wasn't just his determination or his bright smile. It was the way he made her feel seen and appreciated. One evening, as Sarah was helping Marcus with his evening routine, he surprised her by asking about her day first, instead of talking about his therapy progress. That small gesture touched her heart. Here was a man going through one of the toughest challenges of his life, yet he took the time to care about her day. Neither Sarah nor Marcus realized it then, but that quiet night in the rehabilitation ward was the beginning of something beautiful. Their story would soon prove that love could blossom in the most unexpected places, between two people who weren't looking for it, but found it anyway. The seeds of their future together were planted in those simple moments, in shared laughs over bad hospital food, in late-night conversations about their hopes and fears, and in the quiet understanding that grew between them. Sometimes, the best love stories start not with grand gestures or dramatic meetings, but with simple acts of kindness and genuine connection. 3 months after Marcus left the hospital, Sarah still thought about him often. She hadn't expected to miss their nightly talks so much. The rehabilitation ward felt different without his warm smile and positive attitude. But everything changed one sunny Saturday morning when Marcus wheeled himself into the hospital lobby, holding a bouquet of yellow daisies. Sarah was just finishing her morning rounds when Betty, the receptionist, called to tell her she had a visitor. Walking to the lobby, she stopped in surprise when she saw Marcus looking healthier and stronger than ever. He had gained back some weight, and his shoulders looked broader from his regular physical therapy exercises. "These are for you," Marcus said, holding out the daisies. I remember you saying they were your favorite. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she took the flowers, amazed that he had remembered such a small detail from their conversations. I was wondering, Marcus continued, his voice a little nervous, if you'd like to get coffee with me sometime? When you're not working, of course. Sarah looked around, suddenly aware of Betty and several other staff members pretending not to watch them. Some of her coworkers had already started whispering. Was it proper to date a former patient? But looking at Marcus's hopeful face, she realized she didn't care what others thought. I'd love to, she said, smiling. I'm off duty in an hour. That first coffee date turned into many more. They met at small cafes where Marcus could easily maneuver his wheelchair, and Sarah discovered that outside the hospital, he was even funnier and more interesting. He told her about his new projects, and she shared stories about her work. Time always seemed to fly when they were together. But not everyone supported their growing relationship. Sarah's best friend, Lisa, pulled her aside one day with concern in her eyes. Are you sure about this? She asked. Taking care of a disabled person for the rest of your life won't be easy. Sarah felt anger rise in her chest. Marcus doesn't need someone to take care of him, she said firmly. He needs a partner, just like anyone else, and he's one of the most capable people I know. Her family had mixed reactions too. Her mother worried about the challenges they would face, while her father surprised everyone by becoming Marcus's biggest supporter after meeting him at a family dinner. That young man has more determination than most people I know, he declared. Marcus faced his own struggles. Some of his friends suggested that Sarah was with him out of pity or because of her nursing background. These comments hurt him deeply, but Sarah's constant support helped him ignore the negativity. She never made him feel less capable or less worthy of love. Their relationship grew stronger with each challenge they faced. Sarah loved how Marcus always found creative solutions to everyday problems. He modified his car so he could drive them on dates, and he learned to cook from his wheelchair, often surprising her with homemade meals. His independence and resourcefulness impressed her more each day. One evening, as they sat in Marcus's adapted kitchen after he had cooked her favorite pasta dish, Sarah realized something important. She wasn't in love with Marcus despite his disability. That wasn't even a factor in her feelings. She was in love with his brilliant mind, his kind heart, and his incredible spirit. Marcus noticed her deep in thought. Penny for your thoughts? He asked, reaching for her hand across the table. Sarah squeezed his hand and smiled. I was just thinking about how lucky I am to have met you, she said honestly, even if it was because of such difficult circumstances. I think about that too, Marcus replied softly. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to the best ones. As they sat there, hands linked across the dinner table, both Sarah and Marcus knew they had found something special. Their love story wasn't about overcoming disabilities or breaking barriers. It was simply about two people who found each other, understood each other, and chose each other every day. The whispers and doubts from others began to fade into the background. What mattered was the life they were building together, one day at a time, filled with laughter, understanding, and deep, genuine love. After dating for 2 years, Marcus knew Sarah was the one he wanted to spend his life with. He had been planning the perfect proposal for months, keeping it a secret from everyone except Sarah's father, James, whose blessing he had already received. What made this proposal special was that Marcus had been working on something extraordinary, a secret project that would make this moment unforgettable. For the past year, alongside his regular job, Marcus had been collaborating with his tech company's research team to develop an experimental exoskeleton. He spent countless evening hours testing and adjusting the device, telling Sarah he was working late on regular projects. The truth was, he wanted to stand while proposing to the woman he loved. Marcus chose to propose during Sarah's family's annual summer barbecue. It was her favorite family tradition, where everyone gathered in her parents' backyard for good food and better company. The weather that Saturday was perfect, sunny with a gentle breeze carrying the sweet smell of her mother's famous barbecue sauce. Sarah noticed Marcus seemed nervous that day, but she thought it was because it was his first time meeting some of her extended family. Her young nieces and nephews had taken a special liking to him, constantly asking for wheelchair rides around the yard, which he happily provided. His easy way with the children made Sarah's heart melt. As the afternoon sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Marcus asked everyone to gather on the back patio. Sarah's mother, Linda, called everyone together, though she had no idea what was about to happen. Only James stood near Marcus, trying to hide his knowing smile. "Sarah," Marcus called out, "could you come here for a minute?" Sarah walked over, curious about what was happening. That's when she noticed a strange device next to Marcus's wheelchair, something that looked like mechanical leg braces with various small motors and supports. "I've been working on something," Marcus said, his voice slightly shaky with nervousness, "and I need some help putting it on." James stepped forward, and together with Marcus's best friend Tom, who had been quietly waiting for his cue, they helped Marcus attach the experimental exoskeleton to his legs. Sarah watched in confusion, her heart beginning to race as she realized something big was about to happen. The whole family gathered around, holding their breath. With great effort and concentration, Marcus pressed a button on the control panel attached to his armrest. The exoskeleton hummed to life, and slowly, very slowly, Marcus began to rise from his wheelchair. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth, tears already forming in her eyes. For the first time since his accident, Marcus was standing. He was a bit wobbly, and Tom stood ready to help if needed, but he was standing. "Sarah Jenkins," Marcus said, his voice strong despite his obvious emotion, "I've dreamed of this moment for so long. From that first night in the hospital when you sat with me and shared stories about your grandmother's sweet potato pie, I knew you were special. You've never seen my disability as something that defines me. You've loved me for who I am, supported my dreams, and brought more joy to my life than I ever thought possible." Using the exoskeleton support, Marcus slowly lowered himself to one knee. The motion wasn't perfect, the technology was still experimental, but to Sarah, it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. The entire family watched in tearful silence as Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone," he continued, opening the box to reveal a beautiful diamond ring. "You are my best friend, my strongest supporter, and my greatest blessing. Will you marry me?" Sarah was crying openly now, mascara running down her cheeks. "Yes," she managed to say through her tears. "Yes, of course I'll marry you." The backyard erupted in cheers and applause as Marcus slipped the ring onto Sarah's finger. Her mother was sobbing, her father was beaming with pride, and even the children were jumping up and down with excitement. As Sarah helped Marcus back into his wheelchair, she couldn't stop looking at her ring and at the amazing man who had just become her fiancé. That evening turned into an impromptu engagement party. As the family celebrated around them, Sarah and Marcus sat hand in hand, both knowing that this was just the beginning of their beautiful journey together. The proposal had been more perfect than either of them could have imagined. Not because Marcus had stood up, but because their love had been witnessed and celebrated by all the people they held dear. Planning a wedding should have been the happiest time for Sarah and Marcus, but they quickly discovered it came with unique challenges. 6 months had passed since the beautiful proposal, and now they faced the reality of organizing a wedding that would be perfect for both of them. Their first challenge came when they started looking for wedding venues. Sarah and Marcus visited 7 different places in 2 weeks. Some venues claimed to be wheelchair accessible, but only had narrow doorways or steep ramps that wouldn't work for Marcus. Others had beautiful ceremony spaces, but bathrooms that weren't properly equipped for someone with mobility needs. "Maybe we should just have a small ceremony in my parents' backyard," Sarah suggested one evening after another disappointing venue visit. She was sitting on Marcus's couch, surrounded by wedding magazines and her planning notebook. Marcus wheeled closer to her and took her hand. "No way," he said firmly. "You've always dreamed of a proper wedding, and that's exactly what we're going to have. We just haven't found the right place yet." Their luck changed when they visited the Garden View Event Center. Not only was it fully accessible, but the owner's daughter used a wheelchair too. She had made sure every part of the venue could be easily reached by anyone with mobility issues. The ceremony area had a smooth, wide aisle, and the reception hall had tables at the perfect height for wheelchair users. But venues weren't the only challenge. When they met with their first wedding photographer, the man spoke only to Sarah, acting as if Marcus wasn't even there. He kept suggesting poses that would hide the wheelchair in photos. Sarah was furious. "The wheelchair is part of who Marcus is," she told the photographer. "We're not trying to hide anything." They left immediately and found a wonderful photographer named Maria who saw their love story as beautiful and unique. The dance floor presented another challenge they needed to solve. Marcus and Sarah wanted to have their first dance as husband and wife, but they needed to figure out how to make it work. That's when Marcus's physical therapist, David, offered to help them choreograph the special wheelchair dance. Twice a week, after Marcus finished his regular therapy sessions, David worked with them to create a beautiful dance routine. They practiced for hours, learning how to move together gracefully, with Sarah sometimes sitting in Marcus's lap as he spun them around, and other times dancing beside him as he did impressive wheelchair turns. "We're going to surprise everyone with these moves," Marcus joked during one practice session, making Sarah laugh as he did a perfect spin. The wedding dress shopping was another adventure. Sarah wanted something that would work well with their dance routine and complement Marcus's suit when she sat with him in his wheelchair for photos. Her mother and sisters went with her to try on dresses, and after visiting 4 stores, she found the perfect one, an elegant ivory gown that flowed beautifully whether she was standing or sitting. Some wedding vendors were amazing, going out of their way to make sure everything would be perfect. Others showed their prejudice in small ways, suggesting that Marcus should use a regular chair for the ceremony to look more normal, or asking Sarah if she was sure about this marriage. These comments hurt, but they also made Sarah and Marcus more determined to have the wedding of their dreams. They wanted to show everyone that love doesn't need to follow traditional rules. One evening, while working on their seating arrangements, Marcus noticed Sarah looking tired. Having second thoughts, he asked softly, though his eyes showed he was joking. Sarah moved from her chair to sit on his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Never," she said firmly. "All these challenges are just making us stronger. Besides, I can't wait to see everyone's faces when they see our dance routine." As their wedding day got closer, everything started falling into place. The invitations were sent, the menu was chosen, including options for guests with dietary restrictions, and their special dance was perfected. They had faced every challenge together and come out stronger. Sarah and Marcus had learned an important lesson through their wedding planning, that sometimes the biggest challenges lead to the most creative and beautiful solutions. Their wedding wouldn't be traditional, but it would be perfectly them, and that's exactly what they wanted. The morning of Sarah and Marcus's wedding dawned bright and clear. The Garden View Event Center looked magical, decorated with white and silver ribbons that sparkled in the early morning light. The garden's flowers were in full bloom, adding splashes of natural color everywhere. Sarah sat in the bridal suite, surrounded by her mother, sisters, and bridesmaids. Her hands trembled slightly as her mother helped her into her ivory wedding dress. The dress flowed perfectly, just as she had hoped, with delicate lace details that caught the light when she moved. "You look absolutely beautiful," her mother said, tears forming in her eyes as she adjusted Sarah's veil. Linda remembered all the worried conversations they'd had when Sarah first started dating Marcus. Now, seeing her daughter's happiness, she felt ashamed for ever doubting their love. Meanwhile, in the groom's room, Marcus was getting ready with help from his best man, Tom, and Sarah's father, James. He wore a custom-made black suit that had been specially designed to look perfect whether he was sitting or moving. His hands were steady as he fixed his blue tie, the same color as Sarah's eyes. "Nervous?" James asked, helping Marcus with his boutonniere. Marcus smiled. "Not about marrying Sarah," he said, "just hoping our surprise dance goes well." The ceremony space looked exactly as they had planned. The wide aisle was lined with silver lanterns and white rose petals. The chairs were arranged with extra space between rows to allow Marcus to move easily. Their guests filled the seats, a mix of family, friends, and even some of the hospital staff who had watched their love story begin. At exactly 2 o'clock, the music started. The bridesmaids walked down the aisle in their silver dresses, followed by Sarah's young niece as the flower girl, tossing white rose petals from her basket. Then everyone stood as the bridal music began. Sarah appeared at the end of the aisle with her father. When Marcus saw her, his eyes filled with tears. She looked more beautiful than he had ever imagined. Her dress sparkled in the sunlight, and her smile lit up her entire face. As she walked toward him, their eyes locked, and in that moment, everything else faded away. James kissed his daughter's cheek before placing her hand in Marcus's. Sarah smiled down at her soon-to-be husband, noticing how handsome he looked in his suit. She squeezed his hand gently as she took her place beside him. The ceremony was beautiful in its simplicity. They had written their own vows, and there wasn't a dry eye in the audience as they shared their promises to each other. "Sarah," Marcus said, his voice strong and clear, You saw me at my lowest point and helped me find strength I didn't know I had. You never saw my wheelchair as a barrier to love. You've shown me that true love has no limitations. I promise to love you, support your dreams, and make you laugh every single day of our lives." Sarah wiped away tears as she spoke her vows. "Marcus, you taught me what real strength looks like. Your determination and joy for life inspire me every day. I promise to be your partner in all things, to face every challenge by your side, and to love you more with each passing day." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Sarah leaned down to kiss Marcus, and their guests erupted in applause and cheers. As they turned to face their friends and family, both of their faces glowed with happiness. The photographer, Maria, captured every beautiful moment: their first kiss as a married couple, the joy on their faces as they moved back down the aisle together, and the love that radiated from them both. She didn't try to hide Marcus's wheelchair. Instead, she captured how naturally they moved together, how their love showed in every glance and touch. After the ceremony, their guests gathered in the reception hall, eagerly waiting for the newlyweds to make their entrance. Nobody except their closest family knew about the surprise dance they had planned. Sarah and Marcus waited outside the doors, holding hands and sharing excited looks. "Ready to show them our moves, Mrs. Thompson?" Marcus asked with a grin. Sarah leaned down to kiss him again. "More than ready, Mr. Thompson." As they prepared to enter their reception, both Sarah and Marcus knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure together. They had created a ceremony that perfectly represented their love, unique, beautiful, and completely their own. The wedding reception was in full swing at the Garden View Event Center. Sarah and Marcus had just finished their surprise wheelchair dance performance to Perfect by Ed Sheeran, leaving their guests amazed and emotional. The dance they had practiced for months went perfectly, with Sarah gracefully moving between dancing beside Marcus and sitting on his lap as he expertly spun them around the dance floor. As the applause died down, the reception continued with dinner. The newlyweds sat at their specially designed sweetheart table, overlooking their happy guests enjoying the delicious meal. The table was covered in a silver tablecloth that matched their wedding colors and decorated with white roses and small fairy lights. During dinner, Sarah noticed something odd about the gift table. Among the usual wrapped boxes and gift bags, there seemed to be dozens of identical small white envelopes. Each one had a strange silver symbol printed in the corner, a geometric pattern that looked like interconnected circles and lines. "Marcus," Sarah whispered, pointing toward the gift table, "do you see all those white envelopes? They all have the same symbol on them. Do you know what it means?" Marcus glanced at the table and quickly looked away, but Sarah caught a tiny smile on his face. "Let's worry about the gifts later," he said, reaching for her hand. "Right now, I want to enjoy every moment of our reception with my beautiful wife." The evening continued with all the traditional reception activities. Sarah's father gave a touching speech about how Marcus had proved him wrong about every doubt he'd once had. Marcus's best friend Tom told funny stories about Marcus's nervous preparation for their first date. Sarah's sister caught the bouquet, and everyone cheered when the garter toss had to be creatively modified with Marcus using his technical skills to create a small launching device that worked perfectly from his wheelchair. Throughout the evening, more guests arrived with the same mysterious white envelopes. Sarah noticed that many of them were people she didn't recognize, men and women in nice suits and dresses who seemed to know Marcus. They would come up to congratulate them, hand Marcus one of those envelopes with the strange symbol, and share knowing looks with him before joining the celebration. "Who are all these people?" Sarah asked after the fifth person she didn't recognize came to their table. "And why do they keep bringing those envelopes?" Marcus squeezed her hand and smiled mysteriously. "They're colleagues of mine. Don't worry, everything will make sense soon." As the night went on, Sarah tried to focus on enjoying their perfect wedding day, but her curiosity about the envelopes kept growing. She watched as Marcus's work friends gathered in small groups, talking excitedly among themselves. They'd all seemed to be sharing some secret that she couldn't figure out. During the cake cutting, Sarah noticed even more envelopes had appeared on the gift table. By now, there must have been at least 50 of them, all identical except for the names written on the front in elegant silver ink. When it was time to open the dance floor to everyone, Sarah's mother Linda came up to their table, looking confused. "Sarah, honey, do you know anything about these envelopes?" There are so many of them, and they all have that same strange symbol. I have no idea, Mom, Sarah replied, glancing at Marcus, who was talking to a group of his colleagues. Marcus says everything will make sense later. Linda patted her daughter's hand. Well, whatever it is, I'm sure it's something special. That husband of yours is full of surprises. As the reception began winding down, Sarah couldn't help but notice that the pile of white envelopes had grown even larger. The symbol on each envelope seemed familiar somehow, like she had seen it before but couldn't quite place where. She remembered seeing something similar on Marcus's computer screen during their dating days, but she had never asked about it. The mystery of the envelopes and their matching symbols hung in the air as the evening continued. Whatever secret Marcus and his colleagues were keeping, it was clear that something big was about to be revealed. Sarah just had to wait a little longer to find out what her new husband had planned. Little did she know, these mysterious envelopes would change their lives in ways she could never have imagined. After the reception ended around midnight, Sarah and Marcus returned to their hotel suite. The room was beautiful, with rose petals scattered on the bed and champagne chilling in an ice bucket. But Sarah's attention was immediately drawn to the large stack of mysterious white envelopes that Marcus had asked the wedding coordinator to bring up to their room. Okay, Mr. Thompson, Sarah said, sitting on the edge of the bed still in her wedding dress. I've been patient all night. What's the story behind all these envelopes? Marcus wheeled over to her with a serious expression on his face. Remember during my recovery, when I told you I was working on a special project in my free time? Sarah nodded. You said it was something to help people with disabilities use computers more easily. That was partly true, Marcus said, taking one of the envelopes and turning it over in his hands. But it became much bigger than that. During those long nights in the hospital, when you would sit with me during your shifts, I started designing something new. Something that could change lives. He handed Sarah the envelope. The silver symbol she had been wondering about all night seemed to shine in the hotel room's soft lighting. This symbol, Marcus continued, is the logo for Adaptive Technologies Incorporated, a company I started with a team of brilliant developers and engineers. We've been working in secret for the past 2 years, developing breakthrough technology for people with various disabilities. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside was a beautifully designed certificate for company shares, along with a letter explaining the company's mission. Each of these envelopes contains shares in the company, Marcus explained, his voice becoming excited. The people you didn't recognize at the wedding. They're my team, programmers, engineers, disability rights advocates. They've all been working with me to make this dream a reality. Sarah read through the letter, her eyes widening. Marcus, this says your company has developed new types of adaptive software, responsive wheelchairs, and enhanced mobility devices. How did you do all this while working your regular job? Marcus smiled. Remember all those late nights I said I was working on routine projects? I was actually in video meetings with my team, testing prototypes and filing patents. We wanted to wait until everything was perfect before going public. He wheeled over to the window, looking out at the city lights. Our first product launches next month, a revolutionary software system that allows people with severe mobility issues to control computers with minimal movement. We've already got major tech companies interested in licensing our technology. Sarah stood up, still holding the certificate. But why all these shares? And why give them as wedding gifts? Marcus turned back to face her, his eyes shining. Because none of this would have existed without you, Sarah. Your compassion and care during my darkest days inspired me to create something meaningful. Every member of my team wanted to share this moment with us by gifting us part of the company's future. He pulled out another envelope, larger than the others. And this one holds our shares as the company's founders. I wanted you to be an equal partner in this venture, Sarah. Your medical knowledge and experience working with patients have been invaluable in developing our products. Sarah sat back down, overwhelmed by the revelation. The envelope in her hands wasn't just a piece of paper. It represented hope for countless people facing challenges like Marcus had faced. The company is already valued at several $1 million, Marcus said softly. But more importantly, we had the chance to make a real difference in people's lives. To give them independence, dignity, and opportunities they might not have had otherwise. Tears rolled down Sarah's cheeks as she looked at her new husband. This man, who had faced such adversity, had turned his challenge into an opportunity to help others, and he had done it all while keeping it a secret, wanting to surprise her on their wedding day. So, Marcus said with a gentle smile, "What do you think about being married to a tech company founder?" Sarah moved from the bed to sit on Marcus's lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I think," she said, kissing him softly, "that I'm even more in love with you now than I was an hour ago, and I can't wait to help you change the world." The pile of envelopes on their hotel bed represented more than just wedding gifts. They were the beginning of an incredible new chapter in their lives, one where their love story would help write hope into the lives of others. 6 months after their wedding day, Sarah and Marcus sat in their new office building, watching a news report about Adaptive Technologies Incorporated on the large screen in their conference room. The company had just gone public, and the response had been overwhelming. Their initial product launch had exceeded all expectations, with thousands of units sold in the first month alone. And now, the news anchor was saying, the story that's capturing hearts across the nation. A software engineer who turned his own disability into a revolution in adaptive technology. Marcus Thompson, along with his wife Sarah, has created devices that are changing lives. Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand as they watched. The office around them was buzzing with activity, developers testing new prototypes, customer service representatives talking with clients, and medical consultants reviewing feedback from users. What had started in a hospital room had grown into something extraordinary. Their first product, a computer interface that could be controlled with minimal movement, had already helped hundreds of people return to work or school. Children with severe mobility issues were using it to attend virtual classes, and adults with disabilities were finding new employment opportunities. Dr. Williams called again, Sarah said, turning away from the TV. After their wedding, she had left her nursing job to become the company's director of medical relations, using her healthcare experience to ensure their products truly met patients' needs. The Children's Hospital wants to implement our systems in their long-term care ward. Marcus nodded, his eyes shining with pride. Schedule a meeting with them for next week, and don't forget, we're visiting the rehabilitation center tomorrow to demonstrate the new wheelchair prototype. The prototype was their latest innovation, a wheelchair that could be controlled by eye movements and slight head tilts, giving independence to people with very limited mobility. Marcus had insisted on testing every prototype himself, working alongside their engineering team to perfect each feature. But the biggest change had come from their decision to create the Thompson Foundation. Using a significant portion of their newfound wealth, they established a non-profit organization that provided adaptive technology to people who couldn't afford it. The foundation also funded research into new assistive technologies and provided scholarships for students with disabilities. One afternoon, while they were reviewing applications for the foundation's assistance program, Sarah found Marcus staring at an old photograph on his desk. It was from their first coffee date after he left the hospital. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, wheeling her chair next to his. "Just how different life is now," he replied. "Remember when your friend Lisa worried about you taking care of me? Now we're taking care of thousands of people together." Sarah smiled, remembering how far they had come. Their office walls were covered with letters and photos from people whose lives had been changed by their technology. There was Jason, a teenager with cerebral palsy who was now attending college online. Maria, a former pianist who could make music again despite losing movement in her hands. Thomas, a veteran who had regained his independence after a severe injury. The success of their company had brought unexpected fame too. Marcus and Sarah were often invited to speak at medical conferences and tech conventions. Their love story, combined with their mission to help others, had captured public attention. But they remained focused on what mattered most, making a difference in people's lives. "We got another letter from that little girl in Ohio," Sarah said, pulling out an envelope decorated with colorful stickers. She drew a picture of herself using our computer system to attend her first virtual dance class. Marcus took the drawing, smiling at the bright crayon colors. "Frame it," he said. "Put it with the others. Their wedding gifts, those mysterious envelopes that had surprised Sarah that night, had turned into something more valuable than money. They had become a way to give hope to others facing similar challenges. Every share certificate had represented not just financial value, but the possibility of changing someone's life for the better." As they sat together in their office that afternoon, Sarah and Marcus knew they had found something rare, a love that not only completed their own lives but had the power to help others. Their wedding day hadn't just been the start of their marriage. It had been the beginning of a mission to make the world a little better, one innovation at a time. The biggest surprise of their wedding gifts hadn't been their monetary value, but the opportunity they provided to share their love story in the most meaningful way possible, by helping others write their own stories of hope and determination.